Next, let me talk about the introduction and some opportunities. And these are just a list of a few things that people are doing around the world, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about it, but just neighborhoods within communities. They're creating electronic village halls. They're using digital democracy to promote social cohesion. So they're wanting to be very careful that we don't create a bigger digital divide. So this is a very important part of the social element. Sip and surfs, learning hotspots, new venture centers and big idea centers to drive innovation and innovation clustering, e-kiosks for government services, cyber creche, e-kindergarten, cyber schools. Telehealth is very advanced in many countries, and I'll talk a little more about that in a minute, but you can get interactive healthcare right into your home, talk to a nurse when you click on something on your screen. And global research centers. For example, Yokokuza in Japan, because of a very high bandwidth network, attracted a research arm of Beijing University from China because of infrastructure they had put in. Now, just a few high-level opportunities, of course. Some people start these initiatives and tend to believe, it's all about broadband. Let me say two things about that, and as a technology background guy, but one that's been working at the higher, more social levels of applications in this for a long time, there are 2 points. It's not about the technology, but on the other hand, it is. There are no great cities in the world today that run on gravel roads. Unfortunately, the broadband that we have in our cities and in most of our rural districts in Canada today is gravel roads compared to the rest of the world. And that's not just Canada. The United States has the same problem. One of our added problems is that a lot of times we compare ourselves when we say, how are we doing? Well, how are we doing against the U.S.? Because it's always been sort of the measure, and government policy people tend to do this. Well, the fact is that the U.S. has been going way down in terms of its broadband index, its innovation index, and its productivity index compared to the rest of the world, and so have we. So it is about creating a big, important broadband infrastructure, but not just for the sake of doing it. It's for ultimately saying, what do we want to do in e-health? What do we want to do in new kinds of collaborative learning? What do we want to do with new ways of entertainment? So all about how we live, learn, play, and work. And so it's important to start at that level, and that then drives the requirement for what other kind of infrastructure do we do. Some communities start at the bottom level, and then they get into big arguments about should it be wireless or fiber, and never get up to where are we really going. So that's one lesson that has been learned in many places around the world. Now, this is an interesting chart. I was in Dubai about 3 years ago giving a speech, and this was before the collapse, the economic collapse that really took Dubai down. And I think many people around the world thought, boy, Dubai seems to be doing amazing stuff, everything I hear about, and I see these gorgeous buildings. Well, I went over there, and I tell you, it's a terrible place to live. Because what's happened is the top guy has given out land concessions to his cousins and brothers all around Dubai, and their idea of a good time is to build a bigger, fancier building than their neighbor or their cousin. But a great city is not just a bunch of great buildings. And so that caused me to say, how do I communicate to people what you have to do to have a really great city of tomorrow? And that led to this pyramid, a 5-layer model, where you're really dealing with a number of layers. And for example, on the bottom, the issue is place. So what do we get here? Well, sometimes we're given it. We're given perhaps waterfronts or mountains or things like that, rivers, and then how do we build on them? And of course, the physical parts, buildings are important, but then infrastructure. What do we do with infrastructure? Well, a lot of that is under our control, and you have to get that right, because the thing that really creates the new jobs, drives the economy, and determines the social character is what I've called the collaboration ecosystem. And that's a function of Richard Florida's creativity indexes. It's a function of the synergy and interaction you get. And if you have that, it'll drive innovation clusters and jobs, and it'll help you really drive this whole issue of new solutions in healthcare, education, and all the rest of it. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you know, to drive clusters like Silicon Valley, you really just need three things. You need universities, research, you need lots of bright people coming along, you need some anchor industrial tenants, and then you need money to drive it. But the fact is that in the Boston area in the 1960s, they had a bigger cluster than Silicon Valley had. And so you say, well, so how is it then that Silicon Valley came roaring right past? Because Boston had MIT, they had Stanford out west, and so on. Well, here's the reason. And I was down in Boston at the time. In Boston, they called it Route 128. That was their cluster. Basically a highway bypass around Boston, and all the high-tech companies were down the road on Route 128. They came in the morning to work, and they all went home at night. And the only time they ever got together to collaborate was when they wanted to get together and get more, throw rocks at the government to get more R&D grants. So California, partly because of the ecology and the geography, they were all living in the small towns of San Mateo, Menlo Park, Cupertino, and so on. And they'd come out from work and go into the pubs and the restaurants, the coffee houses, and they'd all start yattering about what they were doing. It drove the CEOs nuts. They thought they were giving away the trade secrets. But the venture capitalists were smart enough, too, to say, you know, all that interaction, that's driving other companies to be created. Let's keep putting money into that and driving workshops and everything. So it's the collaboration ecosystem that really created and caused Silicon Valley to roar right past the rest to be a very big cluster. And there are lots of others now that are working on it. In Waterfront Toronto project, which is all derelict old ports and everything, well, we don't have geographies and little pubs yet, but they're all programmed and planned. But the communication system, if you collaborate on a system like Canary, like the researchers do, at 1 billion bits per second, you can have a whole lot of people in one room and somebody else in another one, and you all think you're in the same room. We call it same room processing. So the interaction helps collaboration much more than today if you're just looking over a computer and a little camera and that sort of thing. So that's the key thing that drives social prosperity, jobs, and all the innovation clustering that gets to be important. Now, inevitably, there's a sort of a broad focus you have to take, and Windsor-Essex, I think all the broad goals can be put into social, environmental, or economic at a very broad basis, and you drive it through innovation as the engine to really move it forward. And let me just talk a little about what that means. What it means is that you take, for example, on the environmental side, social, cultural, and economic over there are all kinds of little application areas that you can look at that will really move forward. So on environmental, sustainable connected buildings and homes, connected transportation, optimized city infrastructure and logistics, energy controllers, connected utilities, a lot of things around there for reducing the carbon footprint of the city. Social and cultural, well, community health and wellness, smart homes help, e-governments can help, connected safety and security. And these are just some, and you already have a lot of your own goals as well. But on the economic side, just the continuous economic and employment growth. The winners of the Intelligent Community of the Year in New York and the top 7 have always had better economic and employment growth over time than their neighbors who are not into this movement, inevitably. That's why on the waterfront we set a goal to create one of the world's leading intelligent communities. So if you start from there, you get all those benefits as you go along. But this ties in as well with digital media issues, connected workplaces, new commercialization, mobility and wireless, connected learning. There's a community in Wyoming that put in very, very high broadband to all homes. And the teachers, as a part-time job now, are teaching English as a second language to students in South Korea. because they have the broadband as well. In the past, it's been an industry for teachers from over here to go there and teach English as a second language. Now they're doing it out of their homes. That's just one very simple example that's quite interesting. So you have to do it on some sort of platforms, and so innovation and collaboration centers get to be very important, and then you have to have the communication infrastructure in order to really make it work. I'll just talk briefly of a couple of applications that are interesting and some of the things that are going on. Community health and wellness, and the intelligent homes or intelligent buildings. When you get to connected healthcare, you know, a lot of times you have to pick what area you're working in, but I'll talk in a moment about just the aging and care in the home. But of course, you can get into a lot of other initiatives in the whole healthcare ecosystem that really starts to save cost and improve convenience for the healthcare services. But just think about aging well. If the whole community is wired up at a very advanced bandwidth and in an interactive way, such that you can, with the click of a button, talk to a nurse in a clinic, and if the nurse needs more assistance and it needs a doctor, then the doctor in the clinic comes on. Think of the cost saving and the convenience compared to going to the clinic and waiting. Now turn that into the aging side, where maybe you want to stay in your house longer. You can be monitored and all the rest of it, measured daily or whatever, and it provides great opportunities. That's been operating in Sweden for the last 4 years. I've been over in a community called Västerås, about 50,000 people, and in the home, just clicked on a little portal on the TV screen, clicked on the building with the Red Cross, and up comes Nurse Grunden. And Nurse Grunden used to be a real regular nurse out visiting people. She retired, and then this came along, and now she's at the other end of the line, giving people advice and everything else. Great